Hello everybody, and welcome to episode number 33 of FinalBossTV, your endgame rating show. I am your host, Adam K, aka Bay, and today we have Arielle from Bay Retirement Home, and Buraan. We were figuring out his name before the show, but Buraan is here from Divergent. We're going to talk about how to barely tank with your face, or something else of that nature. We'll talk about Bear Druids, Guardians. It's the last Druid class, finally. So many of them. Oh, 4 of them. We have to do them all over again. Warlords, too. Help me. But, that's enough about that. Surviving her romp yesterday. Lovely co-host of FinalBossTV, NFL. Hi, Anna.
Hey, nice to see everybody again today.
It should be a good show. I think, are you ready for this?
Yeah, I am ready for this. If you guys see me like completely not focused on the camera, it's because I'm only wearing one contact lens.
Oh no.
So if I look really blankly at the screen, like then you know that it's because I can't actually see anything, or I can only see about half of the things around me. I just decided not to wear my glasses today because my glasses look awful. I don't want to wear them.
That is untrue.
Yeah.
But
that is totally untrue.
Well, I don't like wearing my glasses. That's what matters.
That's what matters.
Yes, that's a good
headset. Wearing glasses with a headset sucks because then, you know, like your ears hurt after a while. So, I'd rather be half blind. Thank you very much.
That's okay. So, chiming in the peanut gallery over here with a griffin in his gaming bunker. Arielle, there he is. There it is. Hello, sir. Thank you for being on the show.
What? Hey, no problem. Happy to be here. Been looking forward to this for a very long time.
Nope.
Not gonna lie.
Yes, he has.
Very fun. Now, did you?
I've only been bugging you since BlizzCon.
Well, yeah, I know exactly.
Shows in the past, he's finally here on as a guest himself.
Yes.
Hey, I'm like the dawn of the Druid Mafia, all right? So
you did. You're like the Thek for Druids who helped me make the other 2 Druid shows before this, or 3, or 12.
3?
How many Druid shows do we
actually?
have so far?
Yeah.
It's awful. Alrighty, and joining us from over the pond, Burann of Divergent. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, good to be here.
And you have an awesome
Thanks for
shirt
having
on, I guess, right? You wanted to show that off real quick, like pulling Anna?
It's just it's like a Disney logo that says Winterfell.
But yes,
the longest winter ever.
That's awesome. Man. That's so cool. No,
that's awesome.
It's totally okay. All right, let's turn this down and jump right into it, shall we? Okay. The chat room was mad. No more man-made swoosh. That's too bad. Oh well. Oh well.
Well, I guess
indeed.
let's talk a little bit more about you two, because the one thing that I noticed, I've known Arielle for a long time, but I haven't known you for very long, Burann, and I noticed that you guys both put the inconspicuous bear down as y'all's link in our notes. So how did you guys meet? I mean, have you guys been working together on bear Theorycrafting for a long time, or?
So what happened is when Reese started the inconspicuous bear back in, Reese is gonna hang me for getting this wrong. Pretty sure it was Tail End of Wrath, cross fingers. And then once I started getting into Theorycrafting seriously around Cataclysm, she invited me to come write for it. And then when she retired from playing her Guardian Mist of Pandaria, I needed someone else to help me, keep content coming and so on and so on. At first it was Wencelos, but then he had to stop playing sometime in Tier 14. So then I was like, hey, well, why not get the person who basically owns most of the top DPS ranks for Guardians in the world? So I was like, hey, Burann, come right for the inconspicuous bear.
I see. So he got shoehorned because he's good at the game. That's terrible.
But obviously, I mean, I used the inconspicuous bear before, right? Frequenting the forums and stuff, and so I think the first thing we really did together was you got me in for one of the Team Waffle podcast roundtables,
yeah.
And then after that, it was to work on the site.
Match made in heaven.
Something like that.
What it is? Yeah.
I keep trying to get him to come to BlizzCon, so hopefully it'll happen at some point.
One of these days, it would be nice.
You tried once. The time before, there wasn't a BlizzCon, right? They skipped it.
Well, hey, you got to give me some credit.
Anyway.
Well, we'll see if you can do a little bit better for next year, because it would be really nice to have like a Final Boss guest meetup at
that would be awesome
at BlizzCon
cool.
for next year. It would be pretty cool.
It would be pretty awesome.
We'll just at the meeting stone, kind of like the different romps you had this year. Even though, is there some like weird webway thing because of how Warlords is dropping? There might not be a BlizzCon this year, or is that debunked? Have they confirmed denied 2014 BlizzCon?
Nothing. There's been nothing
yet?
so far. But they got to have the World Championship Series somewhere. So
exactly, you're totally right. And they got to have the Hearthstone tournaments, right? Yeah. So
we'll
see.
at some point, I'm sure.
But nobody knows yet.
Nobody knows yet. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll get some confirmation on that soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's jump into the first little topic here. As kind of we usually do when we intro classes, especially ones that have had a lot of sort of evolutions over the course of this entire game. Bear Druids used to be just feral, right? They used to be just feral Druids, and you just went bear for them, and that's what you did. And then it kind of diverged from there. So have you always both been Bear Druids? Like, how far back does being a bear for both of you go? I'll go with Arielle first.
So I started playing a bear in last maybe 2/5 Burning Crusade. I ran a 10-man group on my own where we had it was really strange because we had 2 bear tanks in our 10-man group, which made the bear boss and Zolaman was kind of an RNG fest, because if you got two crushing blows in a row, you're basically dead. Or even the last boss in Karazhan, if he triple crushed you, you were dead. So that hardly ever happened, but it was still really fun. And then I rerolled to DK for the start of Wrath because DKs were overpowered. After they got nerfed to the ground, I switched back to my Druid, and I've been playing my Druid ever since. And for reference, I've been playing since Vanilla, where I started as a Prot Warrior.
But you've been tanking then since Vanilla, then wow.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
A brief stint as a Fire Mage, but yeah.
Oh, shh, don't talk about that. Don't.
Never happened.
Coltrane will hear you. It's okay. And Buraan, what about you?
So I actually didn't start as a Druid. I started playing as a Mage, but in the middle of Wrath. But I played it for like half a tier, right? And then I got my Druid all up, and mostly due to the nature of like not being able to fill multiple roles in the guild, needing whatever. I became a Resto Druid for a bit, and then a Tank for a bit, and then a Feral Druid for a bit, and then through most of ICC I was playing Bear, and I'd only really properly fixed on playing Bear about the beginning of Cataclysm. I think through most of Cataclysm all the way up until now, with a couple of stints of playing Feral in between, but haven't really played anything other than Bear or Feral since ICC properly.
Wow. Okay, so both a long time. So it wasn't like a recent main swap or anything like that. So no. Okay.
No, it's probably as if it's not like Guardians have been flavors of the month or anything. So.
Oh well, yeah.
Except Drexel.
So you guys both bring up Wrath of the Lich King as like your starting point here, and that's sort of like, would you guys agree that that actually became a real thing with Guardian Druids? Like you could actually be considered a main tank, because there really wasn't anything in TBC. And Vanilla was just like you had 2 abilities and Growl, so there wasn't a whole lot back then.
So the thing about Vanilla is that Maul had the single highest threat modifier in the game, so you could actually tank in Vanilla. You just required certain pieces of gear and for your guild to actually believe that you could do it. Fash, which is a name that people probably recognize, people that have played Guardians probably recognize, he actually started as a tank in Vanilla. So. But yeah, in Burning Crusade is where it actually really kind of became more quote-unquote viable. The problem with TBC is that a lot of the end bosses or really hard bosses required a shield tank because of things like Shear or whatever the ability Mag had, I forget. However, there were still bosses that were more advantageous to have Druids tank, things like Brutalis. I want to say the Resist boss. I think just because of what our stamina modifier was back then.
Just HP and resistances, yeah.
Yeah, just things like that. But it really became more fleshed out in Wrath, and there. Oh, what happened in Wrath? So long ago, I don't remember.
You basically got when they. Yeah. Yeah.
In ICC, basically the whole meta in ICC was stack as much stamina and armor as humanly possible, so you don't die. Which bears the highest modifier of both. So that's why bears are really good to have, even though there were aggro issues, and you ended up having to go with some people had to go with an armor pen trinket in order to keep threat over DPS.
Yeah, that was
Raz like, I think some people messed around with some avoidance, but I think in general you just stack tons of health, have more health than any other tank, and just like take everything to the face and hope your healers keep you up.
Yep.
But I will say it was quite fun because I played Feral just at the end of ICC, so I ended up with a full armor pen cap set of gear, and playing bear with that was a bit nuts.
That's right, because armor pen cap existed back in the day. Yeah. You are totally right there.
And then obviously in Cataclysm we became more of a tank, although there were some issues between Cataclysm launch and 504A, I think. Or no. 5 is Mists. 40 something. 406, I think.
Put that in perspective with bosses.
It was first half of tier 11.
Yeah, sounds like first half of tier 11 to me.
Okay, yeah.
Where Savage Defense which was a bubble we gained in the last little bit of Wrath, it would actually get taken off by the first hit, even if the first hit didn't actually like fully go through the entire bubble, which was a huge problem for tanking ads.
That sounds awesome. Wait,
yeah, that does not sound good.
Yeah,
because it only absorbed the next hit, right? That's how it was.
Yeah.
Regardless.
So if you had like 10 ads and you had a pretty big shield because you geared correctly or whatever.
Yeah.
And one ad goes tickle and then it's all gone.
Yeah. But on the flip side, we were really good for tanking really big mobs like bosses. So.
Yep, absolutely. That's what Dalton actually brings it up in chat. Soul Reaper on Arthas was the best. Just taunt Soul Reaper, eat the damage, then taunt back with your tank. That was how it worked. Absolutely. Yep, I had a bear tank back then. So then, you touched on Cataclysm a second there, but I wanted to bring this up, that your absorb thing was there, but then that was the rise of the Bearcat, correct? Which,
yes.
what the heck was Bearcatting, real quick?
So, because Guardian and Feral were basically in the same spec, the only difference between a cat and a bear was a couple of minor talents. I think all you needed to do to be a bear was to take the talents that make you crit immune and give you a bit more armor, and the only things you need to have a cat was like you kind of wanted to take Tiger's Fury because that was a talent still, and you kind of wanted to take something else that like extended Savage Roar, I think, or Rip.
Or I think it was the Restoration. It was the execute talent.
But anyway, regardless, you could basically play a full cat as a bear, or play at the same time in the same raid on the same boss in the same fight,
in the same gear,
a full cat and a full bear in the same gear without doing anything different. Which meant that whenever you weren't tanking, because obviously in Cataclysm we had Vengeance, not in the same way we have Vengeance now, right? Because it was capped. But whenever you weren't tanking, you would do more damage than any other tank could possibly do. And in fact, you could often do a lot of damage compared to some of the DPSers. That was what was particularly broken. So you could really kind of abuse some of the fights. Take an extra tank when you didn't need to, really take an extra tank. And not have any penalty for it.
Wow, sounds like bears would have been the chosen tank then, for at least in a pair of tanks, so that if you ever had a job...
Yeah, you were like de facto the best off tank you could have in the game at that point.
Yeah.
Because let your other tank take all the vengeance at the start of the fight, and they do fantastic DPS, great, and you could just sit there doing cat and actually probably beat them.
So did you see a lot more bear tanks being used by guilds, or was it that a lot of maybe kitty druids had a bear off spec as it may be?
I think there were many guilds that made their cats sort of go sort of bear for some fights. Like Spine would be one, because having an extra tank to tank lots of ads at the end would be good. And the other thing was that like the 4-set bonus at that time was brilliant as a raid cooldown, right? Increased healing on their entire raids was a bit broken.
Which
having a
everyone
feral
made their cat druids use.
Yeah.
And
Always going, my execute phase.
I even remember asking a question about that at BlizzCon 2010. I think it was 2011, I think, saying, this 4-piece set bonus for tier 11, or tier 13, I guess. Are you worried about everyone making their feral druids use the bear one? And they're like, no, we put this thing in so they won't have to do that. Yeah, it turns out they were wrong.
It wouldn't be the first time that they were wrong about how something played out.
Nope.
But,
it wasn't. It was. They put in the debuff that so when you switched to bear form, you got a debuff that meant you couldn't use the 4-set. Like you wouldn't gain the benefit with the 4-set for the period of the debuff. So all they did was they made the feral preemptively go into bear form and lose even more DPS to get the raid cooldown because it was that good.
Oh no!
Yikes.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Now, how did you gear back? Just quickly before we move on, did you still gear with DPS stats? Were you gearing agility or were you gearing stamina?
100% agility.
Okay, so it's still agility back then.
Yeah, I think
There-
25 man went a bit more stamina
Yeah.
on like really cutting edge progression, but otherwise most people just went agility because agility
Agility
gave
is
more
the
attack
god
power,
stat.
more
Oh.
more absorb, more chance to proc the absorb, more DPS,
And dodge.
all that sort of stuff, more dodge, yeah,
Oh wow. Yeah.
more armor.
Well, that would be why the switching specs things worked then, because that up until recently, the whole gearing into DPS stats was not something every tank could do.
No,
It's true.
But I guess if you guys have always been able to do it, then no wonder you were so flexible back in Cataclysm.
Yeah.
yeah,
And it was really a problem that started with DKs back in, like from a design point of view, it was a problem that started with DKs back in Wrath. So it was only a matter of time until they did it. But
Yeah.
in the end, it's a good thing they did it a good thing for the game that they did it in the end.
So now let's move on to Mists when they split y'all specs up and made feral DPS and feral tank different specs. How did that affect how you played or how Bears played as a whole?
Um,
Not really that much. I mean, you never go into cat form now, except for, I mean, you can for Heart of the Wild burst DPS, but otherwise you never go into cat form except for your movement utility. So you're pretty much in bear the entire time. Other than that, the rotation kind of lost some of its complexity because Pulverize got removed. But on the flip side, they added these active mitigation abilities that we had to pay attention to, which I guess when you're looking at it from a design perspective, you think, well, we're taking away some complexity from the rotation, but we're adding other buttons that you have to press. So hopefully it'll can even out and you'll feel good in the end. Turns out Savage Defense isn't really that big of a deal.
Oh.
Like it's not that hard to pay attention to. It was interesting to get used to at the start of the expansion, but now it's like, oh, I have 60 rage. I'm gonna press Savage Defense now. Like it's really easy to track. So it's not that big a deal.
I think that comes down to some issues with Savage Defense that maybe we'll discuss later. But yeah,
Yep.
Well, how did the community receive the change then? The change to 4 specs? Was it pretty much or was it, yes, we've been waiting for this for a long time, or were there any people who were kind of bummed?
there were a couple of people
Nobody
that maybe
wanted
shed
to
a
lose
tear.
bearcatting.
Yeah,
No one
for
wanted
that.
to lose bearcatting.
Why would you not want to still be OP? Why, come on.
Oh, that's what it is.
Fair point, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, in general, it's a good thing because it means that we don't get affected by any like real feral changes that maybe nothing to do with PvE, but we just do with PvP or something. So those sorts of things meant that I guess the ones of us when the change happened, we were kind of hopeful that the balance would be better. They would allow Blizzard to tweak it in the correct way instead of having to have this spec that you can't do too much to because it'll also affect feral at the same time. Because say for example you change SI survival instincts for bears, you'd also then change it for ferals, and then that might screw everything up.
I
Yeah.
see.
And Reese wanted me to mention real quick. There was this actually one of the talents that was bugged and carried over from Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria, where like you would get extra damage reduction over what you should have, and they didn't catch that until like I couldn't remember if it was the end of beta or the start of Mists. So long ago. I don't remember, but yeah, there was this bug talent that was carried over, and you had extra damage reduction over what you should have.
That was
they
only
end up having
like what it spec before, so there was like half the bear community were running around OP, and the other half were running around really crap.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like if you'd had this talent spec before the changes all happened, the talent like disappears. You couldn't select it or unselect it, but you got the benefit of it. And then the other bears were sitting without the talent, and so they're all balanced around this like slightly good bear that somehow doesn't really exist properly. So
Oh no.
that was a bit weird.
Yeah.
That was
I
fixed.
see.
So.
But
you
overall, good change for the game, and hopefully both specs will become more fleshed out as we move into Warlords.
Yeah, it seems
Oh,
like it's much
absolutely.
more neat, or it seems like it's much more neat design-wise that they can, like you had said before, Burann, where they can tweak one spec without affecting both a tank spec and a DPS spec at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think the only downside is that obviously now that all of your talents are shared across all 4 specs, so I think maybe they created a separate problem in that. So if you look at like the tooltip for Heart of the Wild, it's now like this long.
Well, yes, it is.
Well, they said they're going to address that. I mean, they're
a
going to
novel.
address
Yeah.
that by having the tooltips show only.
Only
The
what
tooltip
is
thing is a
pertinent.
problem for paladins as well.
Yeah.
Like pretty much any hybrid has that issue, though y'all have it a little bit more severely than most. But they said they're going to address that issue, I believe, by making the tooltip only show what's relevant to the current spec that you're in.
Yep.
Yep.
Just a little more infrastructure in the background, so you only see what's relevant to you. Yeah. Nice little fix. Goes quality of life, so you don't have to read a paragraph to learn what your spell is doing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's move along then to a favorite topic of the show and talk about 10 versus 25, and how bears work in both sizes of grades. Not
this might
10
be
versus 25 in general.
yeah. This might be one of the last times we ever talk about this, so let's revel for a little bit, because in many more months from now, it'll just be, so how are you in Mythic? And then it'll be perfect. But right now, let's still talk about it.
But yeah, let's talk about it.
Wait to that point.
Yeah, different specs work differently in different sizes of grades, especially with different damage layouts and different different incoming damage and different requirements for outgoing damage from you as the player. So tell us a little bit about how bears behave in 10-man raids versus 25, whether they're extra good or not quite as good in either one of those sizes, and whether there are any major gearing differences or anything like that.
I don't know,
so
if you want to pick.
All right, cool. So in tier 11, everyone was kind of getting used to how the mitigation system worked on all classes. Bears performed reasonably well for most of tier 11. There were some bosses, especially on 25, that were really big problems. Empress was probably the biggest defender there. Heroic Empress and Heroic Shaw to a lesser degree, because once Tooth and Claw was introduced, you could always make sure you had a Tooth and Claw on the Dread Thrash when it hit you. So it kind of removed one of the melee swings. But Empress was definitely the biggest problem, because with having dodge as an active mitigation ability, if you have, say on Empress, the 4 mobs swinging at you all really hard and really fast at the same time, if all of them randomly decide to hit you at the same time, you're basically dead. So if you don't have enough externals to prevent that from killing you until the danger's gone, then it's kind of bad. Same thing happened on Windlord, because the popular strat on Windlord was just like, oh, let's just tank all the mobs with one tank, which is something that Paladins and Monks did really, really well. Druids not so much, especially if the raid was really slacking on dispelling. That turned out to be really, really bad. Happened to me more than once. Then this problem continued on into tier 15, and it was a really big problem in tier 15 because Monks had their bug DPS where they were doing ridiculous damage. Paladins had basically the ability to, the more things tanking, the better they could keep their own selves alive, plus remove pretty much any dangerous tank debuff by themselves without any outside interference.
Yep.
And also heal the raid.
And also heal the raid.
Warriors, Warriors were very survivable, but their DPS was really terrible. And I don't really have much experience with DK, so I can't really say where they landed in between there. But in 10-man, Bears did just fine in TOT. But in 25, a lot of 25-man Bears I've spoken to said they had a lot of problems with specific bosses. Animus came up repeatedly as a boss that was really problematic because you had to swap, Fasttake told me, it was 4 stacks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's like if you take any more than 4, you die. Basically.
Yeah, whereas other tanks can take it way higher. Something like Hordon came up repeatedly as well. And then there was bosses like Tordos, where you actually couldn't do anything about the stomp, whereas Paladins and Monks were just physical damage, lol.
What is it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, in Tordos, we made one of the best bat tanks, so take that for what it's worth.
Absolutely. Yep.
Even though you didn't have Cake Toss.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, yeah, best bat tank, except it's only if you're going with a strategy where you actually tank the bats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But moving into Siege, we're extremely good position in Siege. They've kind of learned from what happened in both tier 13 and 14 and 15. I get my numbers mixed up. And we got a huge stamina buff in Siege, and Barkskin cooldown got cut in half purely because of Nazgrim. But yeah, now we have extremely strong DPS in Siege and extremely strong survivability. So
okay, and then switch that around now, because you've mostly been only 25-man tanking though, right, Arielle?
Me? No, I'm 10.
So 10.
10,
You're both. Yeah, so you're both 10. And Buraan started as 10, but now 25.
Yeah, so
Right?
we've made the transition after we cleared Siege of Orgrimmar to 25-man, obviously in preparation for the next expansion when you're going to go 20-man, so we thought might as well try and get the roster together earlier. But yeah, the issue between like 10 and 25 really, from what it came down to, is like if you really, really, really wanted to make a bear work, you could make it work in any like raid size. 25-mans, you just have to get a few extra external cooldowns, maybe adjust your gearing a bit, because the health that you had if you geared for a rage, like for rage gain, was enough for 10-man, but in 25-man you kind of struggle sometimes, so you might have had to put some stamina trinkets on, or get some more stamina, or even go like Heart of the Wild to get like a lot of stamina, and then you'd be okay. But so really, because bears were just a lot more maintenance than other tanks that could just go, no problem, let's just go straight into it.
Physical damage, what is it?
So yeah, that's what I think some people ended up getting told to reroll when they're in 25-man. But from the perspective of Siege of Orgrimmar, on both difficulties, bears seem to be like completely fine. Like realistically, they're in a pretty good spot. There's not really any. The main problems tend to come when Blizzard design the encounters in a certain way, and certain damage types are really detrimental to different tanks. One of the biggest examples of this would be Siege of Orgrimmar on Malkarok, because of the Blood Rage. Not that it's necessarily the intended way to do the fight, but if you solo tank the Blood Rage as a bear, you're going to run into lots of problems, because it doesn't really get mitigated in any way. It goes straight through your armor, straight through everything. You just have to sit there with lots of cooldowns on you, whereas other tanks, they guarantee damage reduction. You also can't dodge Blood Rage, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's happened on a lot of fights. I think Raden from last year was an example of one where I guess they had meant for the tanks to have to deal with multiple different kinds of damage, but in the end, you only did the one phase, which meant that there were certain tanks that were really good for it, and certain tanks that just categorically could not tank that fight. Yeah, Bloodcase. Yeah, and we have a Bloodcase.
Can you say it's a little bit BS that monks get to have their active mitigation up 100% of the time for that fight?
I know.
And everybody else has to time it.
It's not very active if it's always there. It's pretty passive, don't you think? Yeah, a little bit.
But I've seen that before, but that does seem to impact tank balance a whole lot, what you just said. It's not necessarily how the tanks work, but how Blizzard has designed the encounters and what the outgoing damage is like on specific abilities. That because the tanks all have different sorts of tools to deal with it, you're always going to end up having some tanks that are better for some things and some tanks that are worse. And if you have an encounter that has a pass-fail on a mechanic, then there really are going to be tanks that just can't do it as well. I'd love to hear a little more about what your experience was like switching into 25s. I know you guys have both said that bears are in a better position in Siege than you were in Tier 14 and Tier 15, but did you notice any big difference with the way that you were handling damage?
So, in changing the difficulties, right? The 25-man damage, the incoming damage, is slightly more, and it's only slightly more to the extent that you sometimes have to be a little bit more on your toes because of how active mitigation works, which we'll go into a bit later, I guess. But it's all very much take the damage to your face and then immediately heal it back up before the next bit of damage comes. And in 25-man, because that brings you ever so slightly lower, it's a little bit more dangerous and you have to be a bit more reactive. But in general, the damage isn't, it's not significantly more that it makes huge problems. And this fact that now in a 25-man raid where I have like 2 warriors and a dozen sacks and PSs, like it doesn't really matter. It's like, there's a bit of more damage that normally I would be struggling with. So you just go, can I have a cooldown, please? Thanks, great, done.
All right.
So it's just about managing your cooldowns a bit more in 25-man, which I think goes along with the theme. I think 25-man just needs a little bit more organization in general. But yeah.
This isn't to say that people weren't clearing TOT or Tier 14 with bear tanks like Envy, Defenestrate, and there's
Temerity
for some reason
bear tank as well. At least they used to. I don't know if Temerity.
But like for some reason, bear tanks seem to be more popular with Eastern European and Asian guilds. I don't know why. Like whenever I go to look at DPS ranks, it's like for 25, there's like Fat Steak and Dex are in there somewhere, and then there's like 15 Russian or Eastern European or Asian names. And I'm like, I don't understand. But
well, you guys said it. One of y'all said it just a couple minutes ago, where you can clear with any tank. You can clear with a bear tank. It's just that certain other tanks have been a little bit lower maintenance and have made things just a little easier. But that doesn't mean that you can't clear all of these raids with a bear tank. Like, if people have done it, and it's not like it's not doable, or that it's even that much more difficult.
And I think the other problem is you end up with some guilds that are maybe towards the higher, like more visible, like higher ranked guilds, will end up asking their tank to switch to a different class, or even just playing an ult for a couple of fights starts to make people go, bear is just not going to work, and therefore other guilds further down the rankings will be, you have to re-roll. Bears don't work. They're terrible. We have to run with a monk and a paladin all the time.
I think this sort of almost harkens back to last week's episode when we were talking about how many more higher end progression guilds are in like the EU cluster rating scene versus like the US side, that we only have so many guilds that like everyone in the US looks up to, and we kind of amalgamate what they do, and like none of them use bear tanks, so they're like, I guess bears are terrible. But then there's so many more EU guilds at that level, like the higher end level, not like the method level, but so many more that have cleared. Like 86 EU guilds killed Garrosh before Anna and I killed it mid-30s US. Like, that's more than double. But they use a lot more bears over there, so people over there are like, oh, they're pretty good, because they have more of a spectrum. So, yeah. It's kind of like when Rig stopped playing as DK, everyone's like, DKs are terrible! Stop!
And like, Sloot switches off of his paladin to his warrior for the end of Siege, and then everyone's like, are paladins bad? And it's like, no, that's not how it works. But he did that. He switched to his warrior. He's been using his warrior for a while. I don't know if he's still using his warrior a lot, but he was definitely using his warrior for the end of Siege progression instead of his paladin. And you see that kind of thing, and you're like, man, are paladins bad? Should I stop playing my paladin? No, that's not what it means. But
nope,
I mean, what the top raiders do, definitely, and what they say, even and the way that they make a very, very small percentage difference seem like the biggest difference in the world, because it is to them, because they are optimizing that tightly. And then everybody else reads and sees that kind of thing, and they're like, man, and that really just impacts the way that people think. So I can see how a lack of popularity with bears is
the number of times we've had questions on the forum going, oh my god, why is Sato gemming mastery or whatever. It's like, okay, so I can hypothesize, but I don't really know, and it's not necessarily the best way to gear. He's doing something very specific with what he wants to do, so yeah, what are you doing? You really need to think for yourself sometimes instead of just
I've
copying.
had an argument before with Sleepbag on this exact topic, so I mean, he was trying to tell me that bear is just more viable for like 10 mens, and I'm like, no, you're actually just wrong. I'm sorry. Yes, there are problems in 25, but 10s, no, you're just wrong.
So, yeah, I mean, and from the European perspective, right, like one of the top 25-man guilds, Envy, uses a bear tank, and the top 10-man guild, Paragon, uses a bear tank, so there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a regional thing, I think. Yeah, it has to be. It's just like how the game,
or just who the player is that you've been playing with for 5 years and what they're most comfortable playing.
Yep.
Yep.
I think that's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is, when you're in a high-end guild or whatever, your tanks are some of the most reliable people in your raid, and you probably will stick to them no matter what. And you may ask them to re-roll sometimes if it's really bad, but otherwise you'll just, providing the balance is just right, they'll play what they're playing, and you'll keep with those two tanks because they're reliable.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm going to move us along real quick here. Let's get a little more in-depth into the Guardian tanking model and how it's now as it is. So I wanted to go first off on how Rage works, because there's only 2 Rage tanks in the game. And how it is right now with Warriors, to my understanding, is Warriors just like, I can't get rid of it! Get off of me, this red bar just won't go away. So how is Rage for bears, Arielle?
We get a lot of it. And a lot. One of the primary things you have to learn as a Guardian is how to manage your rage effectively. You obviously want to keep Savage Defense up as much as possible, but that only costs 60 rage, and you need like a minimum of around 6 2/3, being all mathy, RPS, which is a term we developed at the start of Mists of Pandaria to reference the amount of rage you generate per second, to keep Savage Defense up when you're actually tanking something.
Okay.
And any excess rage is either dumped into Frenzy Regen if you need a heal, or Maul if you have nothing else to do. And around Siege of Orgrimmar, we're getting around 18-ish RPS.
Okay.
Higher when you have cooldown up.
Yeah.
So we're like swing and rage pretty much the entire time.
Wow.
Although when you're getting into later heroic fights, you find yourself pressing Frenzy Regen a lot, especially things on things like Siegecrafter and Thok.
Now, is that because you don't have a block mechanic per se, so you don't actually just mitigate damage, so you have to basically take it all to the face, so you get more incoming? Is that how?
Well, we can dodge auto attacks,
Sure,
and auto attacks obviously make up for about anywhere between usually around 50 and 70% of a boss damage of a boss's damage.
Yeah.
So we can dodge those, and we run in siege gear probably in the neighborhood of between 55 and 60% dodge when Savage Defense is up. And then on top of that, we have Tooth and Claw, which reduces the damage the next auto attack is going to do to you. So between those two mechanics, we take very little auto attack damage if you're maintaining them correctly. It's just the special attacks, things like electrostatic charge, pretty much anything Thok does, anything from Paragons like Bloodletting, stuff like that, where you have to heal it up. But you have so much excess rage that you can afford to burn a full Rage Frenzy Regen to get, I don't know, 400, 500, 600k heal instantly.
Wow. So yeah, then so I'll bring it over then to you. So I brought up that you have no shield mechanic. So then, and we'll switch topics here, I guess, because Burann just brought up in chat. Does Tooth and Claw, the debuff that actually works, does it affect another tanking if you tank swap?
Yes.
I guess it's just
so it doesn't matter who the target hits. So we'll talk about the Monolith in a sec. But whatever you hit, if you have a Tooth and Claw proc and you hit your main target with a Maul, the next auto attack that thing does to whatever it's attacking will do X amount less damage, which is some multiplier on Vengeance. I'm not going to get into that. So it still reduces damage that your other tank takes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, which is a really weird niche to have, but yeah. Anyway.
So you not only reduce your own damage, you reduce your other tank's damage too.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool.
It's sort of like a built to intervene. How does it proc again? How does Tooth and Claw proc? Is it just off autos or
auto attacks? So haste
auto
increases it. Yeah.
Yep.
Huh. All right.
And
then.
since haste is our second best stat, well, guess what we're stacking.
There you go. All right. So then, to break down a couple of bit of how your active mitigation really works. So you have Savage Defense, which is like your main button, correct?
Yep.
Outside of your cooldown. So really, how does that stack up against Shield Block or Shield of the Righteous or like Death Strike, Bubble Shield of Glory? Or I don't want to talk about Stagger because we all just get grumpy.
Let's talk about all of the rest of the active mitigation that takes effort.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Burann, how's that work?
So Savage Defense is generally pretty good, and on average, it's going to reduce the damage you take. And it's the button that you should press that's going to get you the most use out of your rage compared to Maul or Frenzy Regen in general, unless you're in some stupidly high vengeance situation, maybe. Providing you're taking physical damage, right? Obviously, if you're on a boss like the third boss in Terrace of Spring, you're just taking magical damage the whole time. Therefore, spam Frenzy Regen. But that's the same with some of the tanks, so it's fine. But yeah, when you press Savage Defense, you're not guaranteed to dodge. You could press the Savage Defense, and for that 6 seconds, you could take every single melee hit that the boss throws at you, and therefore your Savage Defense feels wasted. So that's why I think sometimes people would think that Guardian Druids may be take a bit too much spike damage on occasion. But the way you deal with that is you have the excess rage. That's why we want more and more rage, is so that when you do get hit, even though you weren't hoping to, you press the Frenzy Regen, you're back at the full health, and you can maybe dodge the next attack. So it's okay, but it struggles compared to some of the other tanking classes in terms of an active mitigation mechanic. For some abilities.
Ye old avoidance versus mitigation argument.
Yeah, because it's the way I would say it's like, so other tanks have active mitigation, so they can actively prevent damage, and they know they're going to prevent damage.
Yeah.
We just have active avoidance, so it's like we press a button and we can occasionally avoid some damage. It's not guaranteed.
Push a button and hope.
Yeah, so you can't really plan, like there's no mechanic you can plan it around really to say push Savage Defense for, except for stuff like when a boss enrages and starts hitting faster, you might, I'll press Savage Defense, it's probably going to be better. But for something like Execute, we can't press Savage Defense on Execute, because Execute will just go, lol, you wanted to try and dodge that? Never mind, get hit. And
it strikes me that there are a lot of boss abilities that are not dodgeable. I mean,
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was largely
So-
the problem we were discussing before in 25-man and 10-man in Throne of Thunder, is that there's all these mechanics like that you can't dodge.
Right, and
I
that's
think
the
Snap and
entire.
Bite was the one.
Yeah, I mean that's like the entire play style behind Shield of the Righteous as a paladin is to hit it when you know you're going to get hit, and then you mitigate some of that damage, and then I feel like I guess Savage Defense just works in a very different way. I'll be honest, I had to actually look it up to figure out what it was that it did, because I'm familiar with a lot of the tanks, but I'm not familiar as much with the Druid tank. So it gives you a higher chance to dodge then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So have you ever been in? I assume that you have been in this situation a lot, where you've said that if you happen to not dodge the attacks when you put up Savage Defense, then you pop your heal off and bring yourself up a little bit.
Yeah.
Are you in a situation more, fairly frequently where you hit Savage Defense, you actually get hit by everything, you die, and it's just like, well, avoidance sucks.
I almost dodged it.
Well, the thing is, at the moment, in like Siege of Rogbar, for example, there's a quite high vengeance on tanks in general, so the Frenzy Regen is quite effective at healing you up. Even with a small amount of rage, it'll heal you up quite high. So the amount of rage we have in general, you're pressing Savage Defense to prevent the boss damage, and you do spend a lot of your time, you find yourself, okay, I've been hit by a boss stack, Frenzy Regen, Frenzy Regen, Frenzy Regen. You do it like all the time, basically. It's just a sort of style you have to get used to playing. And in the case where you don't dodge, I mean, it could be that you're pressing it and you're hoping that it will work, and then you press another cooldown if it doesn't. So yeah, your main cooldowns get used a lot more as almost like your active mitigation. Like Barskin, they reduced the cooldown of that to 30 seconds, which is 24 with the cooldown reduction trinket, which basically means we have 50% uptime with 20% damage reduction. It tends to get used almost like my Savage Defense didn't work.
Almost like on
running out of
cooldown,
rage. Yeah.
Almost like on cooldown. Yeah, Divine Protection is like that.
Yeah,
for paladins,
DP, yep.
spec correctly.
Divine Prot. Yep.
Yeah.
The weird thing is, when we were at lower rage levels, was that if you were getting hit too much, you'd be spamming Frenzy Regen too much, then you wouldn't have enough rage to get your Savage Defense back up to start preventing the damage, so you got stuck in this Frenzy Regen spam world until you got a cooldown from a healer or something else, so you could not press Frenzy Regen for a bit, save some rage, and press Savage Defense to get back on top of the damage.
Yeah, that was when our rage income was like between 8 and 10 RPS back in Tier 14 Heroic.
Yeah.
So.
I guess boss damage isn't fast enough or high enough to just pretty much like one-shot you if your Savage Defense doesn't end up giving you the dodge. So I was just wondering, how often do you feel like you go splat?
Well,
in comparison
there
to another
are
type of tank.
Boss auto tank damage is never really that high. It's combo damage you have to worry about. Things like getting a Thok auto plus breath plus screech, whatever it's called, all at the same time. Or in TOT, getting a call plus triple puncture plus melee within the same 1 second window. Things like that. Those are the problems things that can happen that can insta give you. But those don't exist in Siege, basically, except for Siegecrafter. But you just Bark Skin and Savage Defense, and you're good to go.
Okay. Interesting.
So overall, though, the more you explain it, it sort of sounds like
it works, but it's a bit clunky.
Yeah, well, it sort of sounds like Blood Death Knights.
That word that the designers love.
Yeah, because Blood Death Knights are very almost like a reactive, like get hit and then heal it play style. They get a bit of a buffer because of the shield they get when the damage they do with Death Strike, but you guys just have to, like, you can either pray you dodge because you're lucky, or you have to get hit and then react to it, which doesn't sound like their active model.
It sounds a little proactive. I mean, you have to hit Savage Defense.
Of course.
I feel like the same thought process goes through a bear's mind that goes through a paladin's mind. Just
in general, it just ends up being like press Savage Defense all the time and give it up as much as you possibly can on most bosses, because there's no real particular, oh my god, this dodgeable damage that is going to be really high, it's going to kill me. Yeah. In that sort of case, you'd be like, okay, well, I'll pop Wall or I'll pop Barskin. You wouldn't be like... The only thing I can really think of that in that context is Siegecrafter. Every time the belt dies, he gains an attack speed buff. That's sort of like, okay, I'll save a charge for that, and I'll use my Savage Defense for that. But outside of that sort of thing, you don't really think about it too much.
I guess
Tauros and whatchamacallit, the third boss in Moshan, those are the two bosses that had dodgeable choreographed boss mechanics. But you definitely save Savage Defense for those, but you don't in Siege. You just use it basically on cooldown when you're tanking something, or when a charge comes up when you're tanking something. You're not going to like waste charges.
Now, the fact that you're using it that often, is that because of the gear levels that we're at here in the very last tier of the expansion? Was it not like that in tier 14? Because I know, at least with Shield of the Righteous, there's a big difference between how you're using it at the haste levels that we're at now and how we were using it, when you were in blue 463 gear.
Well,
So
we capped at how many charges we can use, right? So we have 3 charges total, and every time you use one of the charges will start to regenerate. So you can only there's a maximum amount you can keep it up. You can't keep it up any more than that. And once you've hit that, you can't press Savage Defense any more or less often, really.
I see.
And we hit that somewhere mid T14, at least in Abyss gear by then. So we've had basically the maximum optimal amount of Savage Defense for ages, and it hasn't increased in the same way.
It's just that we've been able to back it up with Frenzy Regen ever since we started to get decent gear in TOT.
I see. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So how about then, you talked a little bit about how you stacked up against other tanks. So just to reiterate again real quick here, if you guys said you were at your level of Savage Defense, basically stacking with tier 14, so how did the rest of the tier work for you? I know tier 15 you had the Heart of the Wild nerf, and that's when monks and paladins were just like, they could tank everything and never die. That's how it was. And now it's sort of like warriors in tier 16. So how have the tiers gone for you guys? Have you been the same? Have you gotten better or worse? What do you guys think, Burann?
Okay, so the Heart of the Wild thing in tier 14, the reason that was good was it's sort of still back to this whole bearcatting thing. Was you could let your other tank start and tank the boss, and you could sit there with a intellect weapon as a bear in Heart of the Wild and spam wraths at the boss during hero and do more damage than all of the rest of the raid.
Yep.
For the duration of Heart of the Wild.
That's why? Okay.
Yeah. So that's why it was really good. And then obviously you switch and you start tanking. So there were certain fights that was really good for, particularly Guardian was one of those because you have one tank for the first minute or something of the fight. And that was also a very tight DPS check.
Yep.
The other thing that Heart of the Wild was pretty good for was things like Protectors of the Endless. The healing gets a bit nuts towards the end of the fight, especially if you're doing the hard mode. And if you have an intellect weapon on and you go cat, you can spam rejuve on the raid and you do more healing than all the healers. So that's quite fun.
Well, because it double dips in cat form.
Yeah, because cat form buffs your agility, and agility gives you spell power, and then
you get increased healing from the Heart of the Wild.
And one of the other caveats of Heart of the Wild is if you're Spect Guardian, you can cast Rejuve in form. So you can just be in a cat spamming Rejuves on everybody.
Heart of the Wild is just a great it's just a great spell.
And they nerfed it. They nerfed some, especially the DPS of it, going into the next tiers. So, and it got a little bit less use as the tiers progressed. But I wouldn't have necessarily said we were really overpowered in tier 14. We were just okay. Tier 15, as we've mentioned, Paladins and Monks were just really, really good. And we struggled, like I said. It's probably the worst tier for us, this expansion. Struggled on some mechanics. Maybe if the bosses had been designed differently and everything had dodgeable mechanics, it would be the most overpowered tank in the world, but that doesn't work.
Council. It was Council.
Yeah, Council was quite good, so we could solo tank Council because you could dodge all the frost buffs. And then, Siege of Orgrimmar is pretty good. I think the tank balance in general in Siege of Orgrimmar has been pretty okay.
Yep, so, I agree.
Okay. So you all both agree, though, that you're in a good place right now. So with tier 16. Yeah. Okay. So we'll get into what you guys want to go for in 6.0 real quick here, but you also commented that you guys are the second highest DPS across the 25 and 10-man model right now, which I guess going back to the whole we're like terrible US raiders that don't use bear tanks. We have no idea this was a thing, but I mean, I can bring up raid bots real quick. You have the actual live bot of this real quick here. I'll bring it up on the screen that you guys can see. This is the last 60 days and of just raiding all across the board. Now, this is all tier 16 fights, or does it pick only certain ones? How does this work?
This would be in everything in Siege of Orgrimmar, in 25 and Heroic.
Yeah. There is a pretty strong caveat to this in that it only pulls, as far as I know, from World of Logs, not Warcraft logs, which is pretty much what everyone worth their salt uses.
Yeah, what a lot of high-end raiders are switching to at this point,
Yeah.
But still... Siegecraft, Black Fuse, Paragraphs of Galaxy, and Garrosh won't be included in that because they don't exist on World of Logs.
Correct.
And it's also it kind of corroborates what I remember what Dot was saying on the Brewmaster episode, that Guardians have like really high DPS and they're just kind of underrepresented. It's totally true. Guardians have, it's because we stack crit to the end of the earth. and crit with vengeance produces ridiculous DPS numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it shows it. I mean, you're not... It's kind of sad that there's like a huge fall off right now with where paladins are. Like, I don't know. I guess I thought they would be a little higher than what they are now, but I guess they really did fall off a huge bit. But like with paladins and DKs holding down the bottom two spots, like really closely together.
Like paladins don't scale very well with vengeance. Like it's just
no, they scale really poorly with vengeance.
Yeah, but it's a big thing to see how close druids are.
Well, I mean, look at warriors, right? Like,
well, warriors are just ridiculous right now. Okay, let's just forget about this tan line up here. This is but I mean, you're only 30,000 DPS under them on average. So
yeah, I mean, you have to look at it in terms of percentages, right? Like,
sure.
Blizzard just said in the past that their target balance is like 5% ish. So I mean, Guardians and Warriors are pretty close to that, but the bottom is like way off of what Warriors are. So.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Well, all of this is likely to change next expansion too, and I guess in the end, even though tank DPS was maybe we'll talk about that later. But I mean, as far as tier 16 goes, the fact that you guys were saying that the tank balance was a lot better, at least in terms of what could be used for what fights and what your guild found it easier or harder to use. The fact that all of the tanks felt pretty viable through siege, including bear, was a good thing in comparison to tiers before. At least that would be my impression of what y'all have told us so far today.
Yeah,
totally.
So, even if there's some DPS problems, maybe they can work the DPS problems out, hopefully, with the next expansion. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't mind being second best. It's not bad. Out of 5.
Then before we work into Anna's favorite question, I have an actual question that came in from you guys. Again, if you do want to submit us questions whenever we announce who's coming on the show next, you can always go over to FinalBoss.tv and submit your question right there, just for the class coming up. So it doesn't really matter if there's a class that's not even answered yet. You can always submit a question early. We always log them all and check them all later. But you can go over to the websites right down below the screen right now. So when we announce the end of the episodes coming on next, or if you know who's coming on for Twitter or Facebook, just ask your questions already. They come on the show if they're really good. And this one was going to be comes in from Galassa on Mugthal. Not sure US or EU. I probably should know that. But what makes you continue playing your bear instead of swapping to another tank? So this is like the ipso facto.
Bear?
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. You're
well,
a bear.
I've been told that druids are the master class. So.
Well.
Why would you play another class when you could play a druid?
They can do everything in the game.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
But let's hear from you guys.
Yeah. What do you guys think, Arielle? What do you think?
I get to be a bear. Like I don't.
I don't understand the question.
I don't know what to say.
I get to be a bear.
Yeah, I'm just really fond of animal forms. I don't know.
What?
I don't know what else to say. Well, okay. I mean, I could go off on some tangent about how I'm like, I can't abandon the community that I've like helped maintain for years and years and years. But
true, there you go.
I just like being a bear. So
just like being a bear.
That's really important, and that's not consistent with what not everybody who's come on the show has said. Like, man, I just am really, really attached to my class. Not every place is like that, but I think you and I are similar in that you're really attached to your bear, and that I totally sympathize with that. How about you, Burann? What about you? What keeps playing your bear?
Well, yeah, I really I enjoy playing a druid, and I enjoy playing a bear. I think there's something about especially the feral community and the guardian community. There's it's just, I don't know, it feels like everybody plays it because they love it, as opposed to playing because they kind of have to, or because they want to do more DPS or whatever it is. It's just enjoy.
Loot bag.
Well, because it's all flavor of the month. It's usually flavor of the month, except for Dragon and Soul.
Yeah. But I mean, there are things about playing a bear that I really like, and have liked. I really enjoyed Cataclysm. I really enjoyed the bear cutting, mostly because I enjoyed playing feral as well. So being able to play both specs sort of in the same fight was pretty cool. And yeah, coming into Mr. Pandaria, I like some of the utility we have. I mean, it's not necessarily the greatest ever, but there's a lot of quirky things that we can end up doing that I think a lot of people don't realize or understand. So I think it's quite fun.
Yep.
Otherwise, just love bears.
Well, fair
and
enough.
druids.
Well, that leads us into the next little topic here. You talked about your utility, and you guys brought up two different talent tiers real quick here. But before we preface either of those, We've talked about all 3 other Druid specs before, with Balance, Resto, and Feral. Now with Guardians, how does your utility kit, if you want to look at it that way, before it all gets changed in Warlords, how does that work for you? Is there anything that really stands out that a Bear Druid does differently, or can work differently, or is it still just like a Druid in your awesome toolkit, Arielle?
Part of the problem, or probably the single biggest problem with being a Guardian in the Siege of Orgrimmar meta right now, is that we can't use a lot of our utility while tanking, whereas pretty much every other tank can. Monks have this other problem with avert harm, but anyway. So you can't be in Bear form of Tranquility. You can't be in Bear form to off heal if you're using Heart of the Wild, but that consumes costly GCDs. You can't be in Bear form to res unless you have Dream of Cenarius, which outside of specific scenarios is generally not a particularly talent you want to take. You can't really do off healing except through Winter's Vigil and just the passive stuff that happens through Sarah's Gift, which pretty much leaves you with the tier 3 and the tier 5 talents, both of which are like Typhoon is probably one of the best talents in the game. It's just a shame that we don't get to use it that much. And Ursul's Vortex is also incredibly good if there's a situation where that warrants its use. Shamans is like the only one that I can come up with. I sometimes use it on Nazgrim, but Shamans is the big one.
Siegecrafter if you do the mines.
Yeah, we don't do that. We skip mines because we hate mines.
Pretty useful challenge modes if you want to run away.
Oh yeah, and you also use Ursul's Vortex on challenge modes a lot. If you get into a hairy situation.
Okay, so
yeah, Typhoon is so good.
So this may display my lack of knowledge about Druids, but the reason why you're saying that you have so much trouble using all of this utility is because it pops you out of Bear form? Is that the problem?
Correct.
So you can't use it while you're actively tanking something?
All of it does. Typhoon works in Bear form, and Ursul's Vortex and stuff work in Bear form, but a lot of the main utility, Innovate, Res, and stuff like that, they take you out of Bear form. Trank takes you out of Bear form.
Yeah. See, I feel so bad because I did some...
This is back when it was sort of maybe useful.
I did some raiding with a bear tank, and he would always be, I think he was our only B-res, or usually one of our only 2 B-reses in the group, and he would be like, oh, okay, I'll res in a moment or 2. Okay, I can res now. And I was wondering if, does he have to, get in range of that dead person? No, I guess he was just waiting until he wasn't actively tanking something.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. If you're really good, you can time it during, a choreographed ability that has a cast time, and you can shift out res and then shift back in before it hits you, but usually you have to wait until you're not tanking something in order to combat res unless you have Dream Scenarios.
The other thing, there was a question on MMO Champion, I think sometime this week, about why are some Guardian Druids using the Barskin glyph, and this is why. Because
are you sure? Because Ahan said you still get the crit immunity in caster form, which I'm pretty sure is correct.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why that's the impression that people got.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, you just use it for PvP in reality.
Okay.
So do you feel like that's bad design? Do you wish that would be fixed? That you could use some more of your not so berry spells while you're in bear form, or is that just like a flavorful part of the class? You've complained about this a lot.
It's to no end during beta, and pretty much throughout the entire expansion about how our raid CD. Which paladins can use while tanking, Devo. Warriors can use while tanking, Rally. DKs don't really have one, unless they tank AMZ, but then they have to lose Purgatory. And monks can't use theirs either because it's avert harm. But we can't... The 2 main ones are Rally and Devo, and we can't use ours while tanking. It's... In reality, it's just an annoyance. It's not that big of a deal because you can almost always... pre-plan a time where you can use it, but it still doesn't change it from being something you can't react to. You can't reactively use it. You have to plan it ahead of time.
You can schedule it, but you can't use it in an emergency, basically.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the way you use it in the emergency is, hey, co-tank, can you taunt for a second? Thanks.
Help!
Taunt now.
Yeah, basically. The same with reses, right? It's like, oh, we need to res immediately, right, quick, taunt. The other thing, before Siege of Orgrimmar, we had Nature's Swiftness still, so we could still use res in bear form if you absolutely had to, but only every minute if you hadn't used it for something else.
Interesting.
Yep, because it was before Siege of Orgrimmar, it was actually pretty common to use Nature Swiftness to heal people that needed healing. Like some random person who was really low, you just in Nature Swiftness heal and touch them, and then they get back up to full. But we don't have Nature Swiftness anymore. We have DOC, which is admittedly a good talent. It's just it competes with Nature's Vigil and Heart of the Wild, which isn't really a good competition.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was asking is, classes have a lot of strengths, and sometimes classes have weaknesses that are just a flavorful with regard to their class. And I was wondering if maybe this whole you have to shift out of bear form to use certain things is just one of those flavorful things that you that is like your payment for being so flexible. But if it's inconvenient enough that you feel like it makes your job harder as a tank, then perhaps we can hope for you guys to get a little bit of relief for that next expansion, or maybe for some developers to listen to your pleas.
Well, I mean, that's the hope, right? I mean, complain long enough, maybe they'll change something.
Certainly is some sort of flavor, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little bit of flavor, but not all that flavor stuff. If it's annoying, then that, if it makes your gameplay less fun, then why is it there?
Yeah,
I mean,
And battle resing as a tank is one of those things that like you have to be able to do in a raid. It's not like you're like off of there casting a heal or something.
Yeah, people find ways around it, I think, in general, but it's a little far from ideal the way it is now.
Yeah.
I see.
The other thing about the res topic, right, is if you don't have any other reses in the raid, which you probably do at this point, but you can symbolize as a holy paladin and they get the res, right? So
it's a 20% on the 60 though, so there is some danger there.
Yeah. So it's still a possibility, but
so yeah, if you're short on reses and you are the only person in the raid that can res, you can get around this issue without having to take the Dreamy Scenario space symbolizing a holy paladin if you have one.
If you have one, yes. Although you generally will have one.
yeah.
And a 25-man, 10-man, not necessarily, but
in a 25-man, you probably have a million sources of reses anyway, so why are you asking?
Well, yeah, maybe.
How many warlocks?
Yeah, 7. Sorry, 7. Yeah. So real quick before we move on to the little commercial break here, anything else on like you have Disorienting Roar here, but that goes up against Vortex, and then like Mighty Bash, like anything for those two? No. Mighty
Bash and
looks
Vortex.
like PvP. What's that?
I don't know. In 10-man specifically, if your complex, a number of, like, comps have very many stuns, you'll take Bash. For example, on Paragons right now, I'm taking Bash for Skeerbloods because we don't have enough stuns to double stun them. So I take it so I can stun them once. And Vortex is good for things like Shamans, where you can control the slimes. Roar is the only use I can see for it is Garrosh, maybe, but I haven't.
Maybe, yeah.
So the thing about Disorienting Roar is the days breaks on damage, so the only thing you can use it for sometimes is to interrupt, but it doesn't silence them or anything, or lock them out. So.
Yeah.
It doesn't work on the Aslan Garrosh.
Yeah.
Oh, then it's pretty much worthless.
For interrupting it, so.
I know
I used it for something, but I can't remember what I used it for. But I don't even know.
I don't even know. I used it once, but I don't remember what it was.
I used it for something, and it was like it was sort of one of those like it was useful maybe once or twice during progression, then I think I forgot about it because it's just not useful enough.
Oh, bollocks to that then. Well, alrighty. I want to take a quick minute here and talk to you guys about some communities and things you didn't know about behind the scenes, and if you did, then you should go to them anyway, but if you don't, then you should. So, if you want some more bear talking, and they both reiterated this earlier today, is this little website called The Inconspicuous Bear. It's theincbear.com, theincbear.com. This is the place for bear tanking guides, your BIS list, the math corner. And then you've got, of course, Arielle and Burann, right? They're right here. Hey, these guys, I think we know who these, right here. They're little bio pages, whatever, but they're going to be posting a whole lot of stuff when the beta comes out. Let me double check that. Arielle, right? Beta stuff?
Oh, yeah. Once we have beta information, like, you'll get stuff really quick.
Perfect.
Sure.
Awesome. That sounds. Yep, that's the best place if you want to know about your bear stuff. Everyone needs a community to go to, and I think that we've been talking about the Inconspicuous Bear now for quite a while, and they've got some awesome stuff there for you guys. And then, of course, if you want more just Druid stuff, or of course more bear stuff, they have their own podcast called Team Waffle Podcast, which is a bear Druid podcast for Druids by Druids because Druids, and they do different round tables on Resto and Balance and Feral Guardian and stuff like that. So they'll, of course, have more updated things as they go along, and they'll talk you through it as it comes out. And that's just teamwafflecast.com. You guys go check them out. And then, of course, there's also over on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube link down below if you've missed any episodes previously. We just had on Ret Paladins last week, for example. But we're up to 32 episodes right now. So, I mean, we're and every after show is on there too. So we've got a little bit of content for you guys. If you missed an episode in the past, you want to revisit BlizzCon, we have our awesome little BlizzCon sort of live fly-through kind of documentary style video. We've also got tons of different classes here. You got the holiday special with Alex from Fat Boss. Where's Nobble? We have Nobble up here. He came on for the holiday time. There he is. Nobble and Silver Latomi came on. We've got Coltrane and Brutal for the end of season finale 2013. Then, of course, the after shows are there too, and we had Prot Paladins and all this other stuff. So you can go subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you missed an episode or you want to send one to your guildie or a friend that plays a different class, go enjoy that. And then, real quick, next week's episode, which is a little bit of out of character, is that we have this coming on next week. March 23rd at 4 p.m. EDT, because we're in daylight savings time now, which actually warrants up to be 9 CET. We've kind of had a mix-up on that. Is going to be the live Trivial Pursuit event. We've got Alex and Laws from Fat Boss, Silver Latomi, Brutal Static, Anna and myself, Elvine the Gold-Making Mage, and Nobble the Noble himself. We're going to play a couple rounds of Trivial Pursuit. We've got an awesome overlay for you guys. It's going to look really nice. And we've also got like our token Vanna White that's going to be here, the actual graphic designer that has worked on pretty much everything on Final Boss except this. This artwork you're looking at right here was made by Mr. Paul Whips. He works for Open Raid. So it's going to be a pretty awesome show. We've got some giveaways and things to do. And we're going to be two to three rounds. We don't know yet how long it's going to be. But definitely stop by for that and spread the word. This picture is up on our Twitter and our Facebook page. But it should be a whole lot of fun. Hope you guys tune in for that. But that's about it. I'm going to move back over here to these guys. I'm actually not sure.
What's so funny?
Yeah.
Shapeshift, man. Come on. Get with the program.
Oh my gosh, I just pulled up my Skype.
So
I may or may not have told him to do that. I'm not.
Yeah, you may not be the only person that told me.
We know what the thumbnail's going to be now for this show.
Yeah, definitely have
yeah.
to keep that on
Totally.
for the thumbnail when I take those after the show. Wow, well then.
It's alright, he's back in caster form now.
Yeah. Ooh. I can res people. Great.
You're
Tranquility, man.
caster.
Don't knock it.
Oh, well, that was interesting. And that was something. Didn't expect that. No one told me about that. Usually goofy stuff comes out in the after show, but they got me in the main show. I got you. All right, fair enough. So,
see, I thought you guys were laughing at me because I literally sat down about 10 right as Base said, "Well, back to the main show," and I put
there's a
Anyway, let's move right back along
Yes.
into the nitty-gritty of how bears work, because I want to hear about gear priority. I know that y'all have had one of the more fun and interesting gearing paradigms that a lot of us other tanks have been very jealous of, and that Paladins got to match this expansion. So let's hear about it. What do bears gear? What are your gear priorities, and why?
Crit, more crit. And when you think you don't have enough, just get more crit.
Lots and lots of crit. Stamina's not
Super
cool anymore.
nuanced.
Yeah. Agility's not cool. Stamina's not cool.
Agility's pretty garbage because the crit coefficient on agility is like 3 or 4 times as worse as actual crit rating. And you basically get no dodge from agility anymore. They nerfed the coefficient in diminishing returns to on-dodge from agility so hard that you just ignore it. Plus, it doesn't contribute to active mitigation because both Tooth and Claw and Frenzy Regen subtract your agility from the actual amount when calculating it. So, except for 10%, but whatever. So you pretty much just straight up ignore agility. Crit and haste are the 2 stats that you mainly want to go for. Crit, then haste. If you are going for like a purely max rage per second build, you go crit to 79%, which is the auto attack soft cap for crit, or the auto attack cap for crit, and then just haste after that, because after you reach the maximum number of crits you can get from auto attacks, you increase the frequency at which they happen. And that's pretty much how a rage per second build works. Although a lot of heroic bears just go straight crit because DPS.
Because DPS.
Oh, that's only after when you finish the tier, right? It's not like a
Yeah, that's true.
when you overgear the content, then you just go for what you fancy.
I
Is
see.
my camera misbehaving?
So now,
Yes, it is, sir.
so now here's
A little
another
bit.
question, because a lot of times when we talk about these gear priorities, we sort of assume, because we're all pretty much in like 575, 580 gear, that we're talking about, people who are in 580 gear. But a lot of the people who watch the show aren't in 580 gear. Perhaps a lot of them are constant viewers of the show who are thinking about how to gear their alts. And so is this true at a lower gear level? Like if I boosted a druid and wanted to start tanking tomorrow in 480 gear, would I still be going crit 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 all the way?
Yep, pretty much. The only thing would be is if you somehow are trying to do some content that you're like super undergeared for, you might want to go for some stamina or something to get more effective health initially, but then you'd pretty much immediately go crit after that. Like if I dinged, well, as I have done on US just now, 90 with a boosted character, as a bear, I might stick some stamina on initially just to be like, okay, so I can survive and people can heal me. I mean, I probably have overgeared healers anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But you pretty much immediately go crit, more crit until you get to 79%, and then you pick where you want to go. You either go more crit because you're super overgeared of the content and you want to just do more DPS, haste because that's generally the best way to go, get more rage, you can survive better, or after you've maxed the crit out, you go either mastery or like mix around your gems and go for more stamina or something. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could go mastery.
And here's one more follow-up question, because I know with paladins and the haste gearing paradigm, that is really dependent on knowing your rotation really, really well and basically playing well. Haste does not give you nearly as many good results if you are not basically playing flawlessly. So is that the same with regard to crit? Because I know that if I knew somebody who had just started playing a paladin tank, I would not recommend that they go all haste in 480 gear, because if they just started playing a paladin tank,
crit and haste and the secondary stats don't affect your rotation at all. It simply affects your like the things you hit off global cooldown, which is Maul, Savage Defense, and Frenzy Regen. And in general, I think it's going to feel a bit weird if you don't have enough rage to be able to use those at all. That's going to be, I think, harder for people in general. If you have more rage, you can compensate for pressing Savage Defense wrongly more often because you have more rage to use for if you're like super terrible or inexperienced, you might I guess you could just be a massive health sponge and go mastery and stamina and ignore everything else. If you really
also depends on how good your healers are. Like if your healers have really poor ping or really bad reaction time, giving them more of a buffer in which to work with can be useful. So basically the priority is hitting expertise caps, stamina until you have enough. Which is totally dependent
that mysterious value of enough. No, I mean,
which is totally dependent on.
This is the Theorycrafting enough for stamina.
Not necessarily their thing. It's a tank thing. I know.
Yes.
Yeah, it's to the point where you and your healers are comfortable with the health pool you have, and then you stack rage stats. Yep. You ignore mastery if at all possible.
But in gear that is appropriate for any of the content that you would be doing, so like in gear that's appropriate for Tot, in gear that's appropriate for Siege Rock or whatever, if you're doing that content, you have more than enough health to do most, if not all of it. And keep in mind, like some of the previous tiers have both been nerfed now, so if you're going to go in to do those, you pretty much don't need any more health.
Yep. So crit all the way then. I guess in every eventuality that I might ask about, it's crit, crit, crit.
Yeah, unless you're somehow really, really well geared and you want to go haste.
Yeah. So that brings us into another question that we had submitted, which is from Odyssey on US Manaroth. Now, there's two questions. We'll do one at a time. It said, do you use cat form when you're not tanking?
No.
The thumbs down. So
confusion.
There are some caveats, but generally no.
Generally no.
The thing is, you can get vengeance from somewhere almost all the time. Like, either you taunt swap the tank to just... Because when you taunt, you get half of their vengeance or something. So that'll help you do more DPS in bear. And there's some AoE on the fight, like whirling on Garrosh gives you vengeance and stuff like that. So
okay,
you almost always have a little bit of vengeance, and you should be just sticking in bear form. This cat, why would you do that?
Fair enough. All right. The second part of the question is a little more pertinent. Is at what point do you actually use DPS trinkets over purely tanking trinkets?
There is no point.
You always use DPS trinkets?
No, as in,
There's
it
no
doesn't
point.
work like that. You can't go, okay, after a certain point in this.
Sure.
This fight, so if you have a Mark Rock, I'm trying to soak the Blood Rage, therefore I must need to take the Stamina Trinket that gives me the AoE damage reduction. Okay, and then now on another fight, maybe I need my cooldowns up more often, so I'll use the cooldown reduction trinket for tanking. Or, so
fair,
it's like, yeah.
You pretty much use the
general,
cooldown trinket all the time.
Yeah, in general, you go with your Rage per second trinkets, and then when you're overgeared, you stick with the DPS trinkets. But yeah, there isn't really a once you reach this gear level, go for DPS trinkets. It's
okay.
I feel like I can survive. I don't need to have any tank trinkets of any note. Therefore, go with what you want.
Okay.
What are your rage per second trinkets? Just to reiterate.
So this is kind of funny. So our best RPS trinket actually comes from Heroic TOT, which is also Bloodlust from Ardius.
Oh,
but because people tend to prioritize just straight DPS at this point, the best DPS trinket we have is Harms from Dark Shaman, followed by there's a hybrid RPS DPS trinket from Thok, which is Thok's Steel Tip, which means okay.
The trinket that everybody wants. Yeah. Yes. My trinket. That's what you're talking about. Is my trinket.
Hey, it's the hybrid option, okay? If you don't want the hybrid option, you go for the DPS or the RPS.
It's the amplification strength.
Yes, the strength trinket.
For anyone who's watching who doesn't know what that trinket is, it's the amplification strength trinket, but it amplifies like 80 different stats. It amplifies everything. So
80,
it amplifies
spirit,
self-healing gun, mastery, crit, haste. I mean, it's a great tank trinket as well, and our monks want it. And I'm not surprised to hear that bears want it. So,
I mean, especially for damage, because with 90, I think in bear form now I have like 92% crit or something.
How does the
all
roll
of that's increased critical damage?
How does the roll system even work with that? I thought you couldn't go above a certain cap. The roll won't work.
Classes can't roll on it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get it from a drop. Classes have to get it from a drop.
I think it's meaning crit, right?
No, how crit works. Yeah, how do you? Once you have so much crit, the dice will have to roll hit or crit. How does it roll more?
So we're talking about the 79% we're talking about is for your white hits, your melee auto attacks.
Of course.
And because most of our rage comes from that. When you're going for rage gain, after you hit that cap, you go for haste. And that cap, what happens after that cap is, or what happens at that cap is, all of your white hits are either glancing blows or they're crits. If you get more crit past that point, it doesn't affect your white hits at all, and it instead affects your yellow hits, so like your Mangle, your Lacerate, Thrash, all that sort of stuff. So crit is still the best DPS stat, even going above 79%, it just doesn't increase your white hit DPS. It increases your other DPS. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know how... Like, I thought it's...
Because our auto attack damage makes up maybe 10 to 15% of our total DPS, depending on the fight. So obviously that means the overwhelming majority, between 80 to 85, comes from yellows, which the crit cap of that is 1 of 3. So that's why crit is the single best DPS stat up until after hitting expertise, up until the cap.
Okay.
But everyone caps at expertise, so
yeah. You got to. It's going the way of the dodo soon, though. So, whew.
Well, I mean, melee will still have to stand behind the boss, but tanks get a passive expertise cap.
3%. Yeah, it's not like death to the melee if they have to be in front. Like
3% is so much better than 7.5. Please,
I know.
So much better.
Well, melee,
Yep.
But that's a completely different topic.
No, it definitely is.
Anyway, let's move right along to symbiosis.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So, how crucial has it been throughout the expansion? I know this is one of those really important abilities that gets talked about a lot whenever we reference druids. Has it been crucial? Have you always symbiosis the same person for the same ability? What have you basically used it for? Or has somebody else always gotten your symbiosis?
You can clear all content and never use it.
Ari gives it to me all the time for Solar Beam and CMs.
That's because Solar Beam's really good CMs.
Yeah.
It's really, most of the time it's pretty garbage in raids. Everything that you get is either irrelevant or very, very situational. There are some Clarice's Bone Shield. There are some Consecration is really good in specific situations. Dark Shaman being one of them if you're tanking Cardress. Whereas,
yeah,
what?
we're he's back. Wait,
Okay.
no, wait.
Stop screaming
it's
TP
flickering
live,
on.
Ari.
I don't know what's going on. My camera is losing grip.
We can go on. We can go on to Buraan then.
I thought I was going to have the potato cam. Come on.
Yeah.
I know.
So, are there any fights where you've used a specific symbiosis ability, or is it just like you said, you could do the whole tier without using it at all?
Yeah, you could basically ignore it if you really wanted to.
Oh.
Otherwise, you can break out the massive table of who gets what for what. And in general, you're probably going to be going for Bone Shield from Death Knights is pretty okay. The other one you might go for commonly would be something like Consecration from Paladins or Lightning Shield from Shamans. Those are the sort of three that you'd probably bounce around 99% of the time. Obviously,
Gotcha.
Lightning Shield and Consecration are DPS things. Consecration helps you keep aggro on ads when they spawn, which is, as usual. And Bone Shield is an okay damage reduction cooldown, but it's not amazing.
I see.
All of the other ones, some of them have sort of uses, but most of them are not brilliant. Like Ice Trap is pretty good, but it's only good because your hunters will normally be on the belt on Siegecrafter, so you would use your Ice Trap instead of them because they're all the way over the side of the map, and use them on the mines. Things like Frost Drama is not particularly great. It's okay if... I use it sometimes in challenge modes just because it makes it really easy. If you suddenly start to take too much damage, you run away, and they're all already slowed, so it doesn't matter. But it's not a really good one, to be honest. Lucid Brew is also pretty bad. It's all right.
You don't want more.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
You don't want more dodge
More
with your
dodge?
dodge.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, that's already like dodge. So yeah, have some more dodge.
Yeah, exactly.
There are probably better things they could have given us with that, but I guess if there was some ability that you really absolutely had to dodge, you could maybe take it to have a little bit higher chance of dodging it.
But it
Fear
sounds
Ward.
like the way it played out is just that you didn't really use a symbiosis ability a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
we've all
it's-
seen the
I think-
chart. There's lots of options, but if it's not something you felt has been really important, then
Yeah, it's like if they made one of them too strong, then you'd always have to have that class in your raid for it to be good. And if they balanced the class around always having a paladin in your raid, it's weird, right? If Guardian Druids are only good if you have this dude to symbiosis in your raid, it doesn't work in 10 man or whatever. And there are
Well, I
some
mean,
proper
there-
bad ones as well, right? Like there are some ones that you just would never take, pretty much, like Feint and Life Tap and
Yeah.
Spell Reflect.
Feint is actually mathematically worse than Frenzy Region,
Yeah.
which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
Life
there
Tap
have
is
definitely
hilarious.
there have been situations where we have used symbiosis to give us something, like giving a battle res, as you said
Stampeding
before.
Roar.
Our feral, our druid DPS always symbiosis as a paladin to get bubble when we do garage. But I guess as a tank, there aren't a whole lot of abilities. Like you said, it's either make or break. Either it's going to be way too strong of an ability, and so you're always going to want it, or it's just going to be as you've pretty much said they are.
But so like unless somebody else needs an ability, I'll put it on whoever gives me the most benefit. And 99% of the time at the moment in farm, that's going to be the Shaman for Lightning Shield. In progression, it might have been the DK for Bone Shield. Otherwise, unless somebody says, "Oh my god, I really need XYZ to be able to survive this fight," like they need
The Ret
Hunters
wants
might
wrath.
need a dash, or the Ret wants Wrath for some reason, or whatever it is.
Rodan.
Fuck, man! I'm not
Oh,
always
yeah.
behind him. I want to cast stuff at him.
Yeah,
I
when the
always
boss
want
goes out of range and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so
On-
unless there's a real reason for somebody else to get it, you'll maybe use one or two
Yeah.
of the symbioses, but you're not going to lose out on much if you don't use it.
On our 10 man, I typically give it to my DK, just for Plague Shrooms, because Plague Shrooms are really, really good.
Yeah, as chat says, plague shrooms.
Yep, Plague Shrooms are good.
So do you see that changing at all? Is that something? Do you wish symbiosis was more cool, or is it just kind of that's the way the ability kind of has to be by design?
Well, we know it's changing, right? Because Holinka said this thing back in December that, we're changing Symbiosis to be defensive cooldowns only.
I don't know
but
if
we don't
Holinka's
know.
that trustworthy though. That guy.
That guy.
I'm just saying, there was a tweet
Brian.
that said, but from a Guardian perspective, it's like, well, let's think about all the classes, right? So
Yeah.
what defensive cooldowns do hunters have? Deterrence? That sounds really broken.
Yep.
Rogues? So that's like Feint or Cloak of Shadows. Both of the, like, Cloak of Shadows sounds really
Evasion. Hello.
broken. Evasion
Have some more dogs or dogs.
More dogs.
sound really broken for a tank to have, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Make them useful while keeping them balanced.
Yeah.
So
They could just make them all different versions of reduced damage taken by 10% for X seconds. Like, with a different name. That's basically what it's going to have
That's
to end
all
up.
they're gonna be. Oh,
Exactly. Because if they're all going to have to be defensive cooldowns, they're all going to have to be relatively balanced defensive cooldowns. And unless you add some nuance into how they do it, like one maybe gives a shield, one gives something else. If like you say, it's going to be deterrence or something like evasion, it's just completely broken because it's don't take any damage. So
yeah, things like dispersion, so on and so on. Like the list goes on, right? Like
yeah.
who knows?
Alrighty.
Specifics yet?
Well, I'm going to move us along because we want to get these talents out of here real quick. And you give you a little bit of time to talk. So, real quick on your level 30 talent, because I know we talked a whole lot about how there's lots of healing that you do as a bear druid. So level 30 talents is Ysera's Gift, which is just like the, okay, I'll heal people randomly. Renewal, and then Cenarian Ward. So do you change these? Have you picked like the same one? Like I think it was Feral's who just picked Ysera's Gift and just forgot about this tier? Or has there been a little bit of option in this healing tier for you guys? Arielle?
Well, the thing is, like, renewal basically is just a worse duplicate of Frenzy Regen, especially in raid content. However, Cenarian Ward, I use Cenarian Ward a lot in challenge modes because it heals for a lot. You can use it pretty much on cooldown before every big pull, which gives your healer more time to react to you, direct incoming damage, and make sure you're not going to die.
Yep.
But for raids, I pretty much just straight up take Ysera's Gift because I don't want to have to worry about anything else.
That's
I usually almost always have Rage and Frenzy Regen, so I don't.
Yeah.
And Cenarian Ward gets covered by Smart Heals.
In a lower rage situation, you might pick renewal maybe. Like so in early content next year, we might take.
Did in tier 14, right? They took renewal.
Yeah.
But now there's so much.
And
rage.
Cenarian Ward, I like every Guardian we talk to, it's like, yeah, but I don't want to have to give up a global cooldown every 30 seconds to cast it. So no.
That's what it
basically.
Challenge modes, you have a lot of free global cooldowns between pulls, so casting it, using it in challenge modes is really good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. That's basically it.
What about level 60 talents now? We got the Incarnation, Soul of the Forest, and then I just put Force of Nature is just awful because you said don't talk about it.
It's Garb. Force Nature is Garb.
Okay.
They tried to make it better.
It looks cool for the screenshot when you kill the boss.
Yeah, basically.
Maybe.
The problem with Force Nature, especially in a raid situation, is that its DPS only scales off attack power and not off weapon damage, whereas both Soul of the Forest and Incarnation scale off weapon damage. So it's automatically behind the other two talents before you even get out of the gate.
Interesting.
There was a problem where, like, when something hit a treant, you would not gain that vengeance. Therefore, the damage the treant would deal would go down. And it would just an endless cycle where basically you would just end up losing damage. They fixed that problem with both treants and Zuin, but it doesn't change the fact that the only things that treants work on in raids are things that don't really hurt you anyway. And then between Soul of the Forest and Incarnation, mathematically they're both pretty similar. However, Incarnation is better for A, shorter fights, and B, if you can time it with hot periods of high vengeance.
Okay.
So let's.
I was gonna say, I guess because the difference is that the Incarnation just gives you like super mangle, and Soul of Force is like super bear form, right? It just really doesn't.
Oh, sort of. I mean,
yeah.
Increases the amount of damage and rage generation you get from mangle.
Yeah.
Whereas Incarnation just removes the cooldown on all of your offensive abilities, including Thrash and Maul, which allows you to spam Maul with impunity as long as Incarnation's up.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, keep in mind that like, a lot of fights involve tank switches, so any fight which involves a tank switch where you might want to be using Incarnation, is going to be better for the duration of time that you're tanking than Soul of the Forest. Soul of the Forest is really like, I'm tanking something the entire fight. Either I have low rage, like so early gear content, or there's no real particular, there's more vengeance in this point in the fight, the boss takes more damage here. It's like, I think of a fight at the moment, but basically you tank the fight from start to end, there's no increase or decrease in damage through the whole fight. Maybe you take Soul of the Forest and
Protector's the end. Protectors would be a good example. Both of them, other the one in tier 14 and tier 16.
Yeah, so you're always tanking something. So
I see.
Fair enough. And last but not least.
Yeah, heart of the OP versus Dream of Cenarius versus Nature's Visual.
Yeah.
So are we always going Heart of the Wild? I mean, is there a reason to take the other talents? What do you guys usually spec?
Nature's
Nature's Visual. Oh, that's right. I mean, I guess you said that they did nerf Heart of the Wild. Well,
the problem with Heart of the Wild is it requires constant, uninterrupted you not tanking, which is something that doesn't really happen in Siege. Malkarok is really the only one I can think of.
Well, it depends how many stacks you'd let your tank take at the start. I mean, they can survive for ages, but if you do it properly, you want like 13 stacks, and you want to get half your Heart of the Wild out.
Yeah.
Plus, you have to taunt ads in, which is a pain.
Yeah. But if you can't make a full use out of the Heart of the Wild, which is like you start with Cat Burst and then switch to spamming Wrath the entire time. And the thing about Heart of the Wild, doing that involves 3 weapon swaps, which is 3 lost UCDs, which is kind of not good. Or if you need it for healing, Thok, Jug. Those are the 2 biggest examples that come to mind where Heart of the Wild is good for off healing and you have nothing else to do. But otherwise, you can take Dreamer Cenarius is good in certain situations if you're taking Harm of Dark Shamans and you're just using 2 tanks on that and no healers and no DPS. Then having DOC for that is really good because you can use the healing touches to either heal yourself or heal the other tank that gets the poison mist thingy. I forget what it's called.
That poison mist thingy. Yeah, of course.
Hey.
Toxic Mist, I think, isn't it? What it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe.
Or something like Nazgrim, where people are always taking spike damage from like Bonecracker or the Mage Cast, the arcane mage dudes. Or, well, it's really any time where you're concentrated enough to manage each of the your raid bars like a healer, DOC can be really good. However, it is a DPS loss, so you have to take that into consideration. Every other situation, you take Nature's Vigil, which is most of them.
So here's kind of a general question regarding y'all's talents. Do you feel like you have interesting choices at all, or do you like your talent tree overall? Even though I know for hybrids it's really difficult to say like, oh, all 3 talents are viable for us in certain situations, or do you think your talent tree is really boring? I guess basically, what's your overall impression?
It's definitely become a lot better, right, in this tier.
Yeah, like in tier 14, it was pretty garbage, but they've made it better over successive patches. Dream of Cenarius still remains the outlier in the first tier. It was really good for like 2 encounters in tier 15, but otherwise, because it removes Vengeance, because it auto shifts you into cat form, that's a bad thing to do. So you try to avoid it if at all possible.
You mean not Dream of Cenarius, the one that blinks.
It's Displacer Beast. God damn it, I'm terrible.
Displacer Beast.
The first tier version of Dream of Cenarius was that. Yeah.
And then Force Nature is just garbage. Like, needs to get fixed. All the other ones, the only real problem is that our talents haven't, specifically the balance and the bear talents, haven't really had much use out of them, which I think will hopefully change in Warlords. But the only reason that those aren't particularly popular is because there hasn't been very much opportunity to use them at all.
Yeah. I think I've preached it multiple times in the show before, is that Mists of Pandaria was almost like a petri dish for testing, with these 3 different tiers that were all very different. The first whole expansion with all these different 3 to 4 raid difficulties to test the talent systems, to get all this feedback, to find out what works, what doesn't work. And we're really looking at a lot of really good changes. I mean, mages are getting 12 new talents and 3 reworked and 2 old spells as talents coming in. Like that's a huge change, right?
Well, to be fair, mages have problems.
No, but we went over that. That's the whole point, is that they had issues, so Blizzard found them, and hopefully is working for them in Warlord. That's the main focus of this. I think that we're going to see a lot of really good changes coming into Warlords. So.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much time we have left, but I mean, we already know we're getting into mastery. We already know that a lot of people just are not particularly happy with the rotation, so maybe we'll see changes there. Who knows what's going to happen with raid cooldowns? Like, there's a lot of stuff that's still not totally information is not totally available on. So
yeah.
We're very positive about the outlook to going towards Warlords.
Yeah.
At least I am.
Well, that brings up to the last little bit here. I'll start off with Burann first. So going into 6.0, what do you want to be fixed, changed, updated, added, removed for Guardian Druids in 6.0, Burann? What do you want? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think mostly it's going to be based around, I'd like the active mitigation to be a little bit different, or at least have something in it that means that we don't have to pray and heal work afterwards so much. I think that's one of the things. Obviously, I mean, it's stuff we've talked about already, like the utility, like the raid utility across tanks, should be a bit more normalized. So mainly referring to our trank stuff, and I think otherwise, I mean, I'm generally pretty happy with Bear. I kind of miss some of the complexity of the rotation that we had in Cataclysm. I think we've had enough time now to get used to pressing our mitigation buttons along with doing the rotation. So yeah, maybe a bit more, some more interesting nuances in the actual pressing buttons to DPS thing. I'd also really like Vengeance to disappear. And,
well,
but they, I mean, it kind of is.
yeah,
kind of
we
is.
know
Yeah.
we know what it is, but that's something.
I mean,
to
the
look
way
forward
that it's going to remain is just as a mechanic to determine mitigation, to balance
Yeah.
balance mitigating spells versus really high incoming damage, really low incoming damage, which it pretty much has to be there for. So.
Yep.
Because at the moment, like it's too enticing for people to stand in stuff or take too many things to do
Like
more
take that
damage.
debuff on protectors. Our DK wants it every time.
Yeah,
Hey,
Yeah.
there are people that do
those
that.
are things.
No, I mean we do
There
that.
are indeed.
No, like there are Guardians do that too. Hans is constantly doing crazy things
That
to.
Scorpion buff on Paragon.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that one
good.
even
That
looked
thing
like
is nuts.
It's so
it is
dumb.
stupid.
Yeah, I know. I
So
mean,
good.
it's just not. I mean, even though it's fun and we grin about it, it's just not a playstyle that really should be relevant. Or like solo tanking the thing on Malkarok. I
It's
just don't. I don't
completely
know
to
if
the-
those are.
It's completely counter to the tank mentality that I think a lot of tanks that have been tanking for a long time
Yeah, I agree.
they were drawn to tanking for. I
Yeah.
didn't start to tank because I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to get to top all the DPS meters because I get to take all this vengeance. That's not at all.
Yeah, stand in all of the fire and like take all of the damage. Every time our
Yeah.
DK like takes some damage, he says, and he's admitted that it's true even if whatever he's taking is not actually vengeance giving and he just made a mistake. He's like, oh yeah, I just wanted more vengeance. Every time we ask him like why you took that damage, like I just wanted more vengeance. And that's, I mean, that's just, as much fun as it is, and as much fun as the last couple years I think have been for tanks. I just don't think that's the mentality that Blizzard. That's not the playstyle that Blizzard really should be encouraging tanks to think about. And I think the game will be a more healthy place if that just kind of goes into the history books.
Too many people playing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. Like if you want a DPS, you should be playing a DPS class.
Yep.
If you're
Well,
going to
that's
solo
not to
tank
say-
something, it should be most efficient to do it that way, not
Yeah.
because you're going to do enormous amounts of DPS on something,
Yeah, like we saw tanks of stuff in Cataclysm, and that back then it wasn't a case of, oh my god, I get tons of vengeance. It was just seemed like a pretty reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
So
Totally agree.
All right. Well then, Arielle, do you have anything else to add on going into 6.0 as a Guardian?
I want a GCD that's not locked up at 1.5 seconds. That's my dream.
You don't want 1.5, you want 1, like Catty Cats have?
No, I want like not necessarily one, but I want one that's not locked at 1.5.
So basically,
'Cause-
you want the paladin talent.
Yes, thanks to battle. That's what I want.
Yeah, sanctity of battle. That's what it is. It lowers our GCD by the amount of haste that we have. Yes.
Okay.
I was trying to remember what it was called.
Exactly that, but I want to not be locked at a 1.5 second GCD because, especially in that mitigation world, that is unbelievably slow. It just feels like an eternity when I'm like, I need rage, but I need to press mangle, and it's going to take another 3/4 of a second to come up again. I'm like spamming. I need rage. Yeah, I want that to be faster.
Okay, so GCD stuff. All right. Well, I'll give you a couple minutes here before we have to get out of here. We are a little over time, but I want to give you guys some time to do your Guardian Druid Bear Box. If you have some closing remarks to the community, what you want to impart upon them, any hints and tips and suggestions and anything else that we might have missed. Arielle, I'll go with you first.
Stat crit, pay attention to don't worry, I'll make sure that all the Theorycrafting stuff, once it comes out, is going to be available on TIB. So you can see exactly what the changes are, what they mean, that sort of thing. Otherwise, just follow me on Twitter, RealEJ.
Yep.
Sounds
we'll
to
get
me
that in a
like
sec.
the summary of what he just said is Guardian Druids have a really good community full of people who love to help you out. So
Pretty much.
make sure that you go.
Yep.
Yep.
Pretty much what I would say. It's like
Oh, and Celestial, give me my goddamn pants. Thanks.
You
How
still haven't
did
gotten
Celestial
your.
end up with your pants?
You still
I'm a
have.
little
Well.
Oh no, I just don't have them, and it's been weeks, and I want them back.
Uh-huh.
I'm just kidding.
Oh.
So Buraan, How about you? What would you like to impart to the community on your way out here of the show?
So I think in general, it's yeah. I mean, there are lots of tips and tricks you can get from different fights for different reasons. But I think there's no like overarching like, this is awesome, do this. So yeah, just come over to the Ink Bear and post a forum thread if you're confused, or people will help you out. Pretty much we have people who played in all different types of raiding, who've broken the game in a variety of different ways. So
Perfect. Perfect. Talk to them.
So if you need tips and tricks and things, that's probably the best place to go. There's nothing that I'd really go like, this is awesome, other than maybe the Paragons of Claxy thing as a druid.
I want to talk about that in the after show, just so we're clear.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
We'll
Well,
get there then.
it's button
Nothing
time
else.
then. I think that wraps everything up real quick. Thank you guys again for watching. This has been episode number 33 of Final Boss TV, the Guardian Druid episode, and around the table again. Thank you very much for being here, Burann. Thank you, sir. You can follow this gentleman over on Twitter at Chris Richardson. Are you gonna shift back into bear form for me real quick as we go out?
Could do. Get the fucking head thing over. There you go.
Almost made it a whole show.
Oh, it's so amazing. It's so. Where
I
did
still
you get
tell my
that?
story
from?
about Faye too. Jeez, after show material.
After-
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I got this for Halloween this year,
That's
actually. So
it's incredible.
Fantastic.
I feel
So
bad
fair
people that
watching.
listen to the audio only version because I'm not going to see you in that, but that's okay.
that's all right.
That's
They'll
awesome.
have to go. They'll have to go find YouTube to find it.
That have to go to as well. And then Arielle over here with the little griffin next to you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Griffy the Griffin. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's good times.
You
Definitely
can follow
love
him
being
on
here.
Twitter at ArielleEJ. You'll find him on Twitter.
And both these
I
guys are
kind of
really active on
appropriated the
Twitter.
EJ name from Hamlet, so I'm not technically part of Loot Jerks, but it just seemed appropriate. I don't know.
Oh, that's where it came
Hear it.
from.
Yeah. Because
Okay.
like at Arielle was taken, so I'm like, well, I'll just put an EJ on the end of it because that's what Hamlet did. So why not?
Yeah.
No one's
exactly.
gotten mad at me, so I'm fine.
Yeah. Fair
Although
enough.
I am
Unless
still
it's
technically a
six-
guide writer on EJ, so it's okay.
Okay. And NFL is over on Twitter as well at, you know what? It's at NFL. Super hard.
Yeah, and y'all make sure that you follow these two guys on Twitter too, because I know most of the guests that we have on here do have Twitter accounts, but these guys are both really active, and I'm sure that they'll answer any of your questions if you want to ask them.
Absolutely.
Yep, sure.
And then, of course, you can find me outside of the show. I'm over at twitch.tv, Bay TLM. That's where all my social media and stuff is. You can always come bother me when I live stream and ask me about the show and whatnot. And again, next week's episode, I gotta bring over this screen again. Hang on a second. Next week, we don't have a class episode, we have a community episode. It's a little bit different this time. It is going to be the WoW Trivial Pursuit live event with Alex and Laws of Fat Boss, Brutal Static, Silver Latomi, and myself, Elvine, the Gold Making Mage, and Noble the Noble. And you'll find out about our teams and how we're going to work the game and stuff before it happens. It's going to be about 2 to 3 rounds, depending on how long it takes. Got some giveaways and other cool stuff, but it should be a fun episode. There
It's
may
gonna
be some
completely
more.
awesome.
There may be some more special guests in chat too. You have to be here for that. I can't tell you, but there might be quite a number of them. But until next week, we'll see you guys, and thank you for watching very much. Trust in the coin. Have a good reset. Have fun at work tomorrow, and then we'll see you for the after show in a little bit. But if not, bye bye guys. Bye. Bye.